This is a Flying Cow production. Moo, 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 moo,
Well, hello and welcome everyone back, or for the first time, to the Academy. That's right. The Academy is the podcast where we take a particular year and we talk about the top 15, quote, best films from that year and then whittle them down and decide what we believe was the best picture from that year. I am your host, the Flying Cow himself, Clay Johnson, and I have here with me today my two co-hosts. We, of course, have the Teddy nominee herself, the chart master, Hannah Kiefer, and the Teddy Award winner, the good boy, Lord Jack Allison. Did I get all of your...
You did. I'm impressed.
Okay.
It's been a while since I've been here, so I appreciate that.
You're welcome. You're welcome. All right. So guys, we are here once again talking about the best films from a particular year. And we are talking this time about the films of 1930. Now, I know a lot of people might be asking, why 1930? That's such an interesting year to choose, especially after doing 1994 and then going to 1930. I will say, I do kind of like the idea that we went from 1994, a year full of very well-known films, to 1930, a year that very few people are familiar with film-wise. Not only because, this is, pretty close to the end of the silent era. We're going to talk a lot about that. But also, this is still pre-code. So some very interesting things. But ultimately, to answer the question as to why 1930, we have to go to Hannah. Because really, what this comes down to is Hannah does a project every so often.
Whenever I finish one.
Yeah. Where she watches 100 films from a particular year. And she just happened to be doing 1930. So I said, let's do 1930. But, I mean, Hannah, any more insight you want to give us as to why 1930?
No, I deliberately, I've now done 3 times, 1968,
Okay.
1994, which we did last time, and then 1930. And I've been choosing the years at random, but trying to keep them at least a decade apart because I like this jumping back and forth. 1930, I'm about halfway through the project, and it's been, I started with one movie. I think I had seen Animal Crackers, and that was it.
Oh, wow.
And so it's been, lots of mix of silence, mix of color and not. It's been the code was in place but not being enforced, so like you have some that are
right,
like,
yeah, I mean,
others that
there
are
was
not.
very early on they tried to put some sort, I mean, it wasn't the code that ended up being, it was a much
like
looser version.
It
was a suggestion. But it was a very loose idea, that if you can actually find the original code online, and like you look at it and you're like, okay, I can see how they were able to kind of get past it a lot, because it wasn't very, strict. It wasn't very concrete. But like I said, we are dealing with 1930. The first talking film only came out in 1927. So, I mean, commonly accepted to be the jazz singer. I think there were some others that were coming out around the same time, but that is the most accepted idea of the first talking film. But I will say, as I was watching these films, I found it very interesting because some of them very much, feel like talking films, whereas others definitely feel like a place in between. We didn't have any straight up silent films in this group. We do have some coming up. But there were, like I said, a lot of them were kind of mixes, where there would be, long stints of dialogue. And then all of a sudden there'd be a placard telling you like what's
Get the title
in
card.
the next scene. Yeah, a title card. And I was just like, that's so interesting that they kept doing that because it wasn't really necessary.
That being said, though, like it is startling how quickly that caught on. Like I can't think of any other movie trend that like within 3 years, I would say of the, I think I've seen like 55 movies from the year so far, and I would say 85% of them are talking or almost completely all the way through.
Yeah.
And so like that is a huge takeover.
Only
in
3 years. Yeah.
It's a
Yeah,
huge
that's-
amount for like all Hollywood to be like, we are totally embracing this.
Right. So obviously, Hannah went into this having seen the majority of the films that we chose. I will say I had not seen any of these. Jack, where were you on your 1930s, education?
Not far from you, Clay. I just coincidentally, well, not coincidentally, I had bought and watched a copy of All Quiet on the Western Front prior to us deciding to do this because it had a remake that got nominated for some Oscars, and I tried to knock out all those, and so I got to watch the original, of course.
Yep.
And I'd heard of a lot of these. I just didn't know that they came out quite this early. I mean, funnily enough, similar to what you were talking about, I also, when you came to me about this, doing 1930, I'm just thinking it's going to be mostly silent films, not thinking that, there had been such a big boom as far as how talkies went. So I even joked at one point with you two just that we should have a silent film exclusive episode where we just don't say anything and just have our dialogue transcribed in these descriptions. But
right,
egg on my face. We have like two
little difficult to do on podcast. Yeah,
a little bit, but funny. Hooray, yucks.
Yeah.
But yeah, that being said, most of these were blind for me going in. Again, heard of a couple, but had not seen many on several different lists, and so it was interesting to finally get my my mitts in there and find out as to why.
Absolutely. Well, I will say before we jump into the films, just kind of a note on how we're going to be doing this. Last time, and I think, going forward, this will probably be the way that we usually do it. But last time we started with the films that were nominated for Best Picture. And that was our entire first episode. And that's what I had planned to do. But during this time, the Academy Awards took place like in the summer, and were actually split between 2 years. And so because of that, you had a ceremony for 1929 to 1930, and then a ceremony for 1930 to 1931. Between those two ceremonies, only 3 films that were nominated for Best Picture were from 1930. 3 of the 5 nominees from the 29-30 year were from 1930. But 1931 was a monster year. And every single film that was nominated in that ceremony was from 1931. So we only had 3. So instead of trying to shove them in at the beginning with a couple of extras, I decided to spread them out. So the way that this will be going is we are also spreading out our host picks as well. So the Oscar nominee will go last. The host pick will go before that. And then the 3 other films will be talked about in alphabetical order. So today, we are going to be discussing the French film L'Âge d'Or, the early John Wayne Western, The Big Trail, the Marlene Dietrich vehicle, Morocco, the Ernst Lubitsch film, Monte Carlo, and the anti-war epic, All Quiet on the Western Front. So we are going to go ahead and we are going to get started. And I am going to be playing trailers for this, and I apologize because it's hard to get trailers from 1930 that have a lot of dialogue. So some of them I might have to help the listening audience with, but we are going to get started with the first film, which is L'Âge d'Or. All right. There's a cow walking through. There's Jesus.
Allegedly.
Luis Buñuel. There's a woman. Oh, man bleeding from the eye. Woman licking a statue's toe. L'Âge d'Or, 1930. Some important looking clergy people.
A website.
Yeah, and some people making out and having more fun in that scene than they did in the scene in the film. We're going to talk about that. Oh, hold on. Okay. Yes.
Let's roll the whole movie.
Yeah. All right. Take it away, Jack.
Okay. Now, bear with me in advance just because the title's French and I can't speak a word of French, so, just bear with me. Okay. L'Âge d'Or. Let's see. From 1930, l'histoire d'un homme et d'une femme passionnément envers le malheur trop pour consommer cette passion sont
from the French Wikipedia.
Yes, thank you, Jack. That's what we all wanted. Thank you.
Anglais, l'association. Oh, I'm also, I guess I got the credits. Le film reste Louis Buñuel et les stars Gaston Modot et homme et l'Alice et femme. Salvador Dali est constituant du film Omelette du fromage.
I should have known better. I should have known better to have you introduce this film. How about in English this time?
Okay. Let's see, where did I put it? A surrealist tale of a man and a woman who are passionately in love with each other, but their attempts to consummate that passion are constantly thwarted by their families and the church and the bourgeois, I probably mispronounced that, society. The film was directed by Luis Buñuel and stars Gaston Modot as a man and Leah Lees as woman. Salvador Dali was a co-writer on the film, I guess. Cheese omelet.
I was like, where is this du fromage at the end? I went to the L'Âge d'Or Wikipedia looking through. I was like, is there something about cheese in here?
I was going to say, I don't remember that part, but okay.
Like
that's the one first thing I can confidently pronounce.
Oh, okay.
So,
but yeah, go ahead.
I say, yeah. So I'm going to preface this is a very surrealist film. I don't think that's arguable. It is, objectively speaking, it's a surrealist film. It is very out there, and of course that means I'm going to be introducing it like Red. I'm going to be fumbling, so bear with me, everybody. This is a weird film. It is about an hour long, so it was probably one of my, aside from the films I'd already seen, this is my first go-to because I figured easy watch, and it's not an easy watch because it's very bizarre. I would say this film has clear messages through and throughout it. Its ideas and its themes are very clearly presented, I think. The problem is that it paints with broad strokes, but it does so in plaid. Because once you kind of get an idea of where it's going with something, then it throws something completely different your way. Like, one minute you're seeing these two people being pulled apart by like these societal figures for making love in the sand, and then the next thing you know, there's a cow on the bed. If nothing else, I feel like that's the most apropos movie we should start with, given the podcast that we're on. But but it's very bizarre. And the film itself even starts out with documentary footage of scorpions, and it presents it that way.
Yeah.
And this is the one film that I had to make sure that I went back and rewatched, because again, this wasn't my favorite of the films we watched, but I know that there's a clear message throughout it, and I had to at least piece together what I could. I still got virtually nothing, and I kind of feel that's a discredit to the film in a way, because I would like to have watched this film more times and have ruminated on it more than I did. But that's my fault for putting this movie off as long as I did for watching it for the podcast. Because there's a clear message behind it. I mean, and it's clear that Salvador Dali, who's also a major hand in producing this, and the director definitely butted heads as far as the final product went. And that's clear. You can see why there's some messaging that probably wasn't agreed upon, because again, it's very easy to lose a lot of people with this type of film. Again, I think that the film, the bones of what it's trying to do in terms of the free love idea, I think are pretty clear. But like I said, I think it has a lot more muddling throughout it, where you wonder, okay, are you still painting with a broad stroke, or are you getting down to something very specific with this particular moment? Because it doesn't seem to connect with the more specific artsier choices as it goes.
Yeah.
That's all I'm going to say about it for now. I kind of want to open up into discussion before I kind of get some more ideas out there. But yeah, what do you guys think?
Yeah, I will say, number one, I wish I had. It took me a while to catch on to the fact that this was surrealist or absurdist, because had I been on that wavelength to begin with, I might have enjoyed it a little bit more. I
just
did
thought it was
not.
going to be about scorpions the whole time.
Well, I mean, I
Where
thought
did the
that's an
scorpions go?
well, honestly, I was thinking, oh, they're making a point with the scorpions, that it's, there's something to do with the scorpions, is, the basis of, like, their thesis of the film kind of thing. But yeah, it took me a while to kind of catch. I actually really like absurdist stuff. I've done a lot of absurdist theater. I have really enjoyed it. I mean, I do like that stuff, but I need to kind of understand where we're going. And honestly, number one, my biggest issue with this film, you mentioned, Jack, that we are introduced. I mean, it even says it's about two lovers, but there's no title card or anything saying that these people are lovers or anything like that. And maybe it was just me, but their first scene where they're making love, it looks like dude's all into it and lady is not, to the point where I was like, is this against her will? Is this rape?
Well, because it starts out with a scream.
Yes, exactly. And then he immediately just turns into a jerk and starts kicking puppies and like pushing people down. So I'm like, oh, this guy's an asshole. He raped that woman. And it wasn't until like halfway through the film that they get back together and she's all like, hey, and I'm just like, what the hell? So yeah, that was whiplash. Like I said, in that clip in the trailer, she's enjoying herself much more than she is in the scene in the movie. So had I understood that this was consensual, maybe I would have been on the journey with them. But I did not get the chance to rewatch this. I feel like I might have liked it a little bit more. But at the same time, if you're that taken out the first time you watch something, probably not going to be that successful, because there aren't going to be that many people that are willing to give it a second chance.
I am glad you brought up the intercourse, because that was one of the key scenes why I wanted to go back and rewatch it, because there are moments where I'm thinking, like, do I remember this correctly? Because again, It doesn't seem like that vibes with like the themes it's going for. I noticed the second time watching that, yeah, there's that screen that like really does make you think, oh my God, what's he doing to her? It zooms in and you do see a grin on her face at some point. And you see her rubbing his back and stuff like that, not to make sound like a rape apologist or anything like that.
Right.
But
yeah,
it does appear that she is enthralled and just into the passion of it. But from the way it starts off, I absolutely agree with you. The first time I watched this, I'm thinking, what's happening with this?
Yeah.
But the intercuts back and forth between them, like, and the longing, I guess that's what kind of made that softened more than my first initial viewing, because it's not even just that particular scene, but moments where it kind of cuts to them separate, and you see them obviously looking, like, yearning for something, lusting for something. Real quick, thank you, Hannah, for your patience. Regarding the puppy kicker guy who looked like Bruce Campbell to me, I loved dearly, because it's kind of like I love characters, the stereotype of characters that solve all their problems with their fists in movies, like Hopper from Stranger Things season 1, or Russell Crowe in general. And with this guy, I particularly liked him a lot because he solves all his problems with his fist. And excuse me, his feet. Because he gets puppies. He tries to kick another puppy through the gate.
He always insists on kicking. He won't punch them. Yes. He drop kicks a blind man.
Yeah. So he kicks a lot of people and objects in this film, and I don't know if that was comedic or not. That was one thing with this film. I think there were comedic intentions behind parts of the film, but I wasn't sure how much of that was supposed to be comedic, because you even get the first puppy kick where you hear what sounds like a human being making the dog yapping sounds, which obviously animal abuse sucks. But I'm thinking, was this intended to be something of a joke?
I think something that I read is that, I mean, that's where some of the surrealism is coming in. But the idea is that society is keeping them from expressing their love for one another. So he's kind of fighting against society.
I thought it was just blue balls.
I mean, you could make that, but I mean that's what the director intended. Whether or not it actually comes across is, up to interpretation.
They also didn't have color back in 1930.
Well, I mean, yeah, but people were using colors. They could have just, taken a little blue pencil in there.
That's true. Just Melier that shit. Oh well.
All right. So
on that note, Hannah, what do you think?
I was going to say, yeah.
So I watched this for the first time in January of 2022.
Okay.
And so I went through and I had seen all of these before we recorded this podcast. And so I went back to rewatch the ones that I hadn't seen in a while.
Sure.
And I got halfway through this movie and was like, have I seen this before? Did I see this? And then all of a sudden it got to the scene in the garden. And I was like, okay, I remember this scene with the audience, the audience and the orchestra conductor. I remember this scene. Don't remember a single thing about the rest of it. And I was like, that's not, I'm not huge on surreal absurdist stuff, but like it depends on a couple things for me. Like, and one is that either you're going to have your message portrayed visually through something that is absurdist, but like really strikes at the heart of it for me. And so if I have that like emotional connection, but the other thing is just if it's memorable, like it sticks with you. And that's partly why it's trying to be absurdist and surreal, is trying to kind of break you out of it in images that are going to stick. And this is my fourth Buñuel film, and I'm not a huge fan of his work just because I'm not a huge fan of surrealism, but I can remember something from every single one of the other ones. And I saw this one only a year ago and could not remember it when I sat down to watch, like to the point where I had to keep looking up and I was like, did I actually watch a different movie? Am I on the same one? And so for me, it didn't work for me. Like I totally would, it was one of those that I was like, this is an important film. I'm glad to have seen it. I was curious if it would work better for me on a second watch, now kind of knowing what to expect and knowing the vibe, and it's still really nothing. The way that it uses its surreal images is so it moves so quickly through them, and that it just kind of, it feels like I'm just watching a mostly disconnected slideshow, and I can kind of piece together a narrative occasionally, but it's not a narrative that I care about to put that much work into, and it's not resonating with me on a message level.
Right.
And so
it's also
not my style.
It's almost actively fighting against a structured narrative.
For sure.
I mean, that's where the surrealism and comes in. I mean, I will say there's a difference between absurdism and realism. In absurdism, really the point of any absurdist is that nothing means anything. I don't know. Have either of you guys seen the film Rubber?
Yeah. Okay. Tire? Yeah.
Yes. To me, that is the classic example of an absurdist film, because I mean, it flat out says, this is pointless. Nothing here means anything.
I thought it was a beautiful coming of age story.
I mean, I really enjoy that movie. I think that because the idea behind, because nothing means anything, we're just going to ramp up the ridiculousness of these images. And yes, in something like that, those images are going to be something that are going to stick with you, are going to be something that will, I mean, I will say, I'm not surprised that you remembered the garden scene, because that is where we get one of the completely memorable moments of this movie, where a woman performs fellatio on the toe of a statue.
And that was not the part I remembered.
No, same. I was thinking of a different part.
Yeah, it was the conductor of the audience watching them that I remember.
Oh, okay.
Well, we're a great triad, guys, because I was remembering a completely different part of that scene too. I was remembering the fingers sucking part.
I mean that is part of it, but yeah.
To Hannah's point, I agree with you, Hannah, that I feel like the surrealist moments, the standout, I guess you can call it that, they are very quickly glossed over. Or not glossed over, but they're very quick. They're not lingered on for very long. I feel like they could have gone on maybe a little bit longer. I remember the finger part mostly because I was actually, historically speaking, the first demonstration of gore on screen in a film. But it is interesting in that because you see the hand, he has some kind of prosthetic on his hand, and he's stroking your face, but then it cuts away so quickly to where I had to even go back the first viewing. Did I see that? Was that right?
Yeah.
There are moments, but yeah, I do agree with you that it does quickly breeze by stuff. But yeah, it seems like we remember very different elements in the same scene, which is interesting.
Well, and I think it's interesting because the one Buñuel film I really do like is The Exterminating Angel, which is one long the premise is all these people who go to a party and then they can't leave, not because the doors are are locked or anything. They just can't find themselves ever leaving, and so they live there in squalor for months. And it is very surreal because there's no explanation given, but it's very slow because it's just watching these people in a room for hours and hours, for weeks and months. And so maybe there is something about this style of surrealism that for me lends itself better to or draws me in more emotionally and connects with that in sort of this long format of making, rather than these sort of quick cut dreamlike moments of making that scene where you feel like you've been it forever, where time has no meaning anymore. And so that definitely is something that I was thinking about, the difference between, what did I like about Exterminating Angel, even though surrealism is not usually my jam. And I think that was part of it, is that it let me sit in the surreal moment long enough for it to really have an emotional weight on me. And it was so much easier for me to just kind of tune this out and just let the images fly by and not let any of them sink in.
Sure. I actually did see somebody comment. Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say, Hannah, do you know where that was in his filmography as opposed to this?
It's the 60s.
Okay.
Oh, okay. So much later.
It's much later.
Obviously, he, has, I will say, when we make the point of, oh, it should be this, it should be, we're very early in.
Oh, for sure.
I mean, obviously, films had been coming out for at least 20 years before this point. Actually probably close to at least 30 years. But they're still working. They're still, working on things. I will say this film, while it does have dialogue, there are a lot of long stretches that are very silent. In fact, there's a very, I think I told you guys, I thought that I had found one version that had subtitles, but it was silent. And then I found one version that was it had sound, but was in French.
Mm-hmm.
Come to find out, I just happened to be on the parts. I was not looking at the same scene each time, and I just happened to go on the parts that were treated like a silent film, as opposed to getting the talking bits in the French film.
Funny.
So yeah, I mean that's interesting, but what I was saying is a lot of this stuff is still in its infancy, especially because they're transitioning from silent to talking. They're trying to relearn a lot of the things that they had already innovated and taught themselves and things like that, just because of the equipment.
There were, this may actually offend some people, but I don't know. This movie at times reminded me of a more refined version of Man with a Camera, because it was long stretches. Of
Man with a Movie Camera, yeah.
So I agree with you as far as the innovation and because there is some clever match cutting going on with some of the editing.
Oh yeah.
The fact that they got that cow on the bed, I'm still how did you even support that thing? I mean, there's technical elements that are clearly throughout this that aren't. It's not just hey, let's just do this thing and just call it a day. They didn't just pop a camera down and point it and hope for the best.
Yeah.
There is clear intention behind a lot of these shots, and again, it's the juxtapositions are really nice, like with the toilet and the sewage, which is again, it's there's ideas there. Actually, maybe a good segue point in regards to that.
Yeah.
I think one of my favorite things about this movie, though, as a whole, is how I could, of all the films we watched, I could see this one being as presented at the forefront of why the Hays Code should exist. Because I could see, there's like, when I was watching this, I'm like thinking, oh my god, how do they even put this?
How did they do? How did they get away with this? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. No, there's some definitely some button pushing stuff.
Definitely.
But I mean, it's intentional. They are trying to push
sure.
buttons. They are trying to push boundaries.
Which I give the film props for, like having some serious balls when it comes to that, because
Absolutely.
yeah, again, I just like imagine like some church group, like around when the Hays Code was being more heavily implemented, and just saying like, this film has profanity, has fornication, cows on beds, sewage. You can see a toilet in this scene. I mean, hell, you couldn't see toilets on camera during the Hays Code. I mean, there's
it's
little
true.
shit that you could not do, and this film was probably what pushed the boundaries of that. So. Yeah, something that's cool.
So one of the last few years where they could have made this for
exactly
for like 25 years after that.
Yep. Yeah, I think the code started like in earnest in what, like 33, I think?
I think it was like 33.
30s. Yeah.
They started rolling it out in like 29 and then like 30, 32.
Right, but I'm talking
really
like
implementing
as strict as it got.
Enforcing it, being like, you have to do this. Yeah.
But they didn't get like cut like in like the mid 60s or something, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, basically 1968.
Okay,
The end of the Hays Code.
Because I know that Psycho had like a lot of hurdles with the Hays Code to get around.
Oh yeah, I mean, honestly, if you watch some films from the early 60s, if you've ever seen The Pawnbroker, the fact that came out during the production code is mind-boggling, because there's nudity, there's all sort. It's really pushing the boundaries on violence, all sorts of things going on in that film. So yeah, I mean, I will say I found it very interesting. You know, I think the biggest difference that we see in these pre-code films in this one and films that you would see just a little bit later is really sexual content. And not to say that people are walking around naked all over the place. They're not. But they're much more free with like their innuendos and, you know, their suggestiveness and things like that. Whereas, you know, a couple of years later, you know, you weren't allowed to kiss, which is why there was so much smoking in movies, which is why a bunch of people got lung cancer. So in order to maintain our purity, we gave people cancer. Thanks, production code.
God, I love cigarettes. What do we think of the acting with this movie?
Honestly, I was so focused on the action of what was going on. I wasn't really paying attention to the individual like performances.
I think they're serving the style.
Yeah.
Is primarily what I would say.
I was about to say, I think
they felt connected and congruous to the style.
Yeah, I think if they were bad, it would have stuck out to me more.
I think they were the most, acting-wise, the most unique of the films we watched, and that it felt a lot more, I mean, which again, there was very little dialogue in the films, so I guess it suits, but it felt like a lot more akin to like the earlier silent films you associate with, like the much more expressive faces and the reactions and whatnot, compared to the things we got, which are a lot more subtle, because, you know, talking and being able to hear it allows a lot more with that.
Yeah.
Particularly, again, from the Bruce Campbell stand-in.
Yeah.
All right. Anything else that we want to talk about specifically about this film?
I've said my piece.
All right. Then let us go ahead and let us move on now to the second film. And that is, of course, 1930s, The Big Trail.
The way is clear ahead. All gentle slopes. So drive down, my friend, and settle it. Lead the way. Zeke will lead the way down. Our trails fork here. You mean you are leaving us? There's a trail I've followed for over 3,000 miles.
That's John Wayne talking, everybody.
I'm heading back to pick it up again.
In case you
follow
couldn't
it to
tell.
the end.
Bowman.
All right. So I apologize. There wasn't really a trailer for this
They're shaking
one.
hands.
The only thing I could find was actual like scenes
clip.
from the film. Yeah. So that's what we got for this one.
The guy whose hand John Wayne is shaking has a very weird hat. Are we still describing the trailer? Or are we?
No.
Oh yeah, cool.
No,
All
we're
the
done.
way through.
Yeah.
Should have done that for 94.
I mean, some of them it would have been better than the trailers that we
I
got.
wholeheartedly agree.
All right, so
trailer.
the big trail of the trailer for Red was horrible.
I'm still upset about it.
All right, so of course
Got
the
the most
big
upset
trail
about
came out in 1930. It was actually the first or at least the first feature-length talking Western. And it was directed by Raoul Walsh. And let's see, it notably was the first big leading performance.
Like the
Leading
breakout
performance
role, yeah.
of John Wayne. Also starred Marguerite Churchill and Elle Brendel. But this film, like I said, is a Western. It is one of like I said, the first talking feature-length Westerns. I'm sure there were some shorts and stuff here and there. But what I was actually really surprised by is number one, how set the Western tropes already were.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, obviously they'd been making, Westerns in the silent era and stuff like that. Westerns were definitely not new. John Wayne did not invent Westerns, but, this was, as we said, the first feature-length talking Western. And it already feels like a Western that I would have watched that was made, 20 years later. So it definitely already has that feeling. And I mean, Jack pointed it out during the trailer. John Wayne, it's his first leading role, and he's already John Wayne. There was no like learning curve. He's already and I mean, this character is like quintessential John Wayne blueprint. I feel like the story is pretty, regular perfunctory Western storyline. But just to kind of give the outline, basically, John Wayne plays Breck Coleman, a guy who is hired to scout for a wagon train. And he is also on the trail of a couple of people that murdered a friend of his to steal his wares, his furs and things like that. And he just so happens to discover that it's the guy who's leading the wagon train, Red Flack, played by Tyrone Power. And let's see, he's also joined by Lopez, played by Charles Stevens, and Bill Thorpe, played by Ian Keith. Ian Keith Bill Thorpe also is kind of the competing love interest for the woman of his affection, Ruth Cameron. But yeah, I mean, I will say just tonally, like, I grew up watching just about every John Wayne Western that my dad could find. The only ones he wouldn't watch were the ones that he thought John Wayne died in. As long as John Wayne didn't die, we were going to watch it. Which is why I never saw The Shootist. And for the longest time, did not see True Grit because my dad thought that was one he died in. So, honestly, John Wayne Westerns are kind of a type of comfort food for me, because it reminds me of that type of thing. And like I said, it's with the exception of some really interesting visual stuff going on here, I will say a lot of the practical effects that they do here. They do a scene where they cross a river, where they're
Mhm.
actually crossing a river with cattle and a wagon train and everything. That's really exciting to watch. There's also a scene where they are letting the cattle and the trains down a cliff.
Mhm.
That was fascinating to watch. But all of the other stuff, like I said, is there's nothing special about it except that it's your typical John Wayne Western. So if you like a typical John Wayne Western, I think you're going to enjoy it. Plus, I do think that a lot of the visual aspects are things that you're probably not used to seeing. So I would definitely recommend that. What were you guys' thoughts on this film?
Okay. Well, first off, did you say that it was your dad that was big into the John Wayne movies?
Oh, he loved John Wayne.
Yeah. So I have seen far too few John Wayne films for to be the son of my father, but
Sure.
this was not among them, of course, going in. But I've seen a couple. I actually do like this type of simple story with like westerns. The idea of this, I mean, it's basically the Oregon Trail sans dysentery. Excuse me.
Right. Yeah.
So I like the idea, like, because that's not an uncommon storyline. Like, we're following this wagon of people across this. It's a destination sort of movie,
Yeah.
road trip western, if you will. I actually don't see that very often anymore. But you look at movies like Stagecoach or Wagons East, and it's like, okay, well, how come? I would like to see a movie like that come out again, because I think that there's meat there for a decent, like, modern adaptation of that. Maybe with some of the less more PC stuff as far as depiction of Native American
Sure.
people, Native American Indians. But I do like the simple concept because it's a very simple thing to kind of jump into. It's not like
Right.
our previous film where it's like, okay, I have to have my brain on at like max, to the max to get what's going on with
Yeah, I
it.
mean, we're remaking things that are less than 10 years old. We
Yeah.
might as well remake, older things that maybe the children haven't already seen.
I agree.
No,
And
no,
again,
we need a new Spider-Man.
well, again, not even a remake. Just
15
again,
of them.
it's a story archetype that's been told plenty of times, particularly in
Mhm.
westerns. I think that there's like something with that, because again, with this movie, I think what it's trying to do is it tries to create several different characters, create them well enough, and you're going to want to follow them on the journey. You don't have to have a very plot-rich thing, because again, everything is just kind of speaks for itself. You have the elements and some animosity between the people that drives the plot. That's it. That's all you have to go with.
Yeah.
So, and I think the movie, for the most part, does a pretty good job balancing those things. I have some issues as far as the structuring of some of those elements with those characters, because I don't think, like, when those moments you talked about where they're going down the cliff, or they're going through the snow, or they're going across the river, I would like to see more of those characters that we've come to meet having to personally deal with those situations,
Mhm.
rather than it just being these wider shots of the cart of the wagons just struggling to get through it.
Mhm.
Which again, it is what it is. But I will kind of echo you, Clay. I think the technical shots are very impressive with this film, especially the wider stuff. Even the stuff where you're not necessarily getting like these very special effects stuff. You just have these very dense, wide, complex depth of field shots that speak a whole lot when they're composed well. One that comes to mind is after one of the attacks and they're burying their dead, and there's mourning, there's passing, but knowing that you have to move on from that point.
Yeah.
And one of my favorite shots in the film is when they're leaving, and it's against them off in the distance, and you see the makeshift graves, and you see that there's a dog by one of the graves, and it stays behind with its owner. It doesn't leave.
Yeah.
And I'm like, that you didn't have to do that, but you did. I mean,
It's a
again,
nice touch.
it's a very simple thing, but it's at the clear forefront, so it definitely has some intention behind it.
Yeah.
And I like that sort of thing. I think that character-wise, they're all pretty decent. I mean, John Wayne's character is very much a Gary Stu, but you just kind of got to deal with that, I guess. It's 1930, and that's just how it goes, I guess.
Mhm.
The villain was, well, I guess there's a couple, but the big one, the Tyrone Powell, I think is his name.
Tyrone
Power
Power.
Senior, because
Oh,
Tyrone
true,
Power Junior.
true.
I looked at him. I was like, hold on, because it's not
Yeah.
the guy from Mark of Zorro and Witness with
Yeah,
Prosecution.
no, it is Tyrone Power Senior.
I looked him up to
He was
see if
credited as Tyrone Power in this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But later
I had to
on,
go.
yeah,
I was like,
Senior.
who is
Yeah.
it? What?
I
Yeah,
looked him up
Yeah.
specifically because I had to make
Yeah,
sure he
he's
wasn't
great.
the voice actor of the original Pete from the Disney stuff.
Mhm.
Because
Oh.
the entire time, it's, all right, guys, come here, you. And
Yeah.
you could just hear the audio spiking whenever he speaks. I mean, the audio, it's 1930, so the audio across the board is shit across these films. But
Yeah.
with him especially, I'm just thinking, like, that poor editor having to listen to this. Yeah, I mean, we can get, I guess, more into discussion about it, but that's my general thoughts on the film, I guess.
Yeah, I'm in a very similar place. Westerns are also these surrealism I don't like, westerns I don't like. I do like movies, I promise. But but westerns are usually not my jam because they are often very similar stories, very similar archetypes that I don't connect with usually. I liked the simplicity of this story, that it was I wish we had gotten a little bit more of that building of the ensemble, because we have like glimpses of these characters, but all but one set of them revolve around the John Wayne character. Like you have little hints of, the woman going with her child and his old friend, and
Yeah.
but most of them revolve around that. And I think you're right that we are ripe for an ensemble wagon train drama. Like, I'm surprised this is not happening. And so I would have liked to see more of those little moments throughout. And I think you're right that especially with those really technically impressive moments of crossing the river and lowering the wagons down the cliff on the chains, both things that, like, I remember from the Oregon Trail games. I mean, like, which way do you want to go down the mountain?
Oh, jeez.
But it does something that I think most a lot of movies are trying to do. It really does do a great job of capturing like the atmosphere of that travel. And it's easy to watch that as just like silly entertainment, but those scenes in particular really bring out the danger of this.
Well,
and
and
that,
it's-
like, you could lose everything in like a matter of seconds.
Yeah,
And
right.
then you're out in the middle of nowhere. You just have to find a way to keep moving on. And I thought it really did a really great job of that. And I would have liked to have more of those moments with people. I would have loved to see follow one of the ones whose wagon just went barreling down the cliff, and how picking that up, and what do you do?
Yeah.
And this movie has a clear budget. They could have probably done something like that.
Yeah. It's like, I would have loved to see that.
Well, and what I think is really impressive about that is that, this took place in a time, if you're going to show that, you're going to actually
do it.
Yeah. Because there's no, we can't, CGI it in post. We can't, do some, I mean, this was, I think, miniatures, I don't know if they were a thing yet. They definitely weren't. I mean, they definitely weren't used during the production of this. I think they would have been a little bit more obvious. But even that, would have been, a little different looking. Yeah. So, but, to see it the way that they did it, it's just,
it brings a weight.
It's impressive.
It
really
did. Like,
yeah.
I so often feel like westerns are trying to make me feel like I'm back in this time, and this one, more than almost any other that I've seen in a long time, really did.
Yeah.
And even though I wasn't, even though the story itself is extremely simple, and the characters are not as developed as I wish that they were, but like I like it as a whole and what it's doing. And I would love to see something like this redone and remade with fleshing out the characters and fleshing out the, getting into maybe some of the more in-depth relationships with the native peoples as you're crossing. And
complicated. I mean, I will say, obviously, unfortunately, during this time, pretty much every actor on screen that was playing a native person was not a native person. You might have had one or two possibly, but they were not the ones with speaking lines. They were not the ones that were being highlighted. But I will say, just because I didn't mention it before, I actually did enjoy the character of Zeke, played by Tully Marshall. I thought that he was a fun side supporting character. I actually would have enjoyed a little bit more from Zeke, because I feel like if we'd gotten more from Zeke, we would have just seen him like singing or something. It wouldn't have been like actual story. It would have just been like, this, nomadic, old Western dude just kind of
prospector archetype.
Yeah, exactly. Story around the campfire and scaring the kids, kind of.
Yeah, I'm like, I would have enjoyed more of this kind of fun out there character. And as you were saying before, it'd be fun to see this type of thing. Westerns are still being made, but what we're talking about is this big cross-country wagon train Western epic. These types of things are not being made right now.
Well, and we went through a phase which I think was a necessary phase, and
Sure.
of deconstructing the Western, and part of looking at the Western American expansion archetypes and messages, and what does this actually mean? And so I think that was necessary, but it meant we got pared down and weren't leaning into the spectacle as much.
What's interesting about Westerns is that it lasted so long. It actually went through like 2 or 3 deconstruction periods.
Yeah.
Because by the time John Wayne was like in full bore Western mode, we were kind of already in deconstructionist Westerns. The Searchers,
the superhero genre,
that's a deconstructionist Western. And then you get even further
Unforgiven.
to something like Unforgiven, and that's a deconstruction of the deconstruction.
Mm-hmm.
So Westerns are very interesting.
Yeah. And so, but I think part of that right now is that part of it has been deliberately losing the spectacle because of being afraid of making that look almost too appetizing kind of thing, like making it look cool to go out and conquer other people's lands. And so
but I think we could do it now in a way that even if those people are assholes, we show them as assholes.
Mm-hmm. And I think there's a way to do both of them now that we've kind of done some more reestablishing of it's more expected now that Westerns are going to be these days. Westerns are going to be critiquing that, and I think there's room with that to be adding in maybe some of the spectacle along with it, which would be really interesting.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, like, it is something that historically happened. It's the way you execute the characters is what it comes down to. I think, and again, that goes across the board no matter what with this type of movie, because again, the simple, it's like an Avatar sort of situation. It's a simple story to bring you in, and if you tell good characters, sorry Avatar, but if you tell good characters, then you're going to that's half the battle.
Agreed.
Speaking of, I did enjoy a lot of the comedic bits in this movie, surprisingly. Probably the most I laughed at, particularly the son-in-law character that sounded like Tommy Wiseau. One of my favorite lines in the movie was what he said when someone tells him that Gus, thank you.
Yeah.
His wife has had a child, and they go, yeah, she had twins. He goes, are they both mine?
Yeah.
That actor was in the very, very first movie I watched from a 1930 project, where he played someone who was he was like the main character. He played someone who was frozen in the 1930s and then the thought in the far future of the 1980s. And so he was like this weird, like, fish out of water character. And so he showed up in this, and I was like, oh, it's that guy.
Yeah, he went by the stage name L. Brendel. He was basically an American vaudevillian who basically his stock in trade was this Swedish immigrant character, which is the same thing that he's doing in this.
I guess since we haven't really touched much on gripes, I guess I only got one that I'll say my piece on. That in regards to the characters, at least, the villains were weak to me. I feel like they were the most undeveloped, and the idea that there's so much potential behind that, because you have, again,
there were 3 of them.
There were 3.
You could have the brains, the muscle, and the stooge, and they didn't balance that out well. And like, one guy just fucks off. One guy just fucks off. One guy doesn't even get killed in the snow, so that kills like the tension of, hey, now this John Wayne character has to go up against 2 guys. No, one guy just
one guy's already dead. Yeah.
And then the standoff between him and the main villain was just really anticlimactic, but you could also argue that it fits within the Western vibe, so I kind of forgave it.
Right. Well, and did anybody else think that it made no sense that they killed off the Bill Thorpe character before Lopez? Because Lopez was nothing. Exactly. Bill Thorpe had so much more going on as a character. Lopez was just there.
Yeah.
He was literally just there, and he ends up being one of the 2 to make it to the end. And then, as you say, he just dies in the snow before John Wayne can even get to him.
And imagine,
it is a little anticlimactic.
And imagine a movie where John Wayne has to go and face off against Thorpe and the what's the other guy's name?
Well, and
those 2 characters teamed up.
Reveal to Ruth of his true intentions could have been so much better.
I agree. He just disappears. He just
leaves. Well, because he gets shot. He gets shot in the back because he's trying to kill John Wayne. And then
she leaves before the reveal happens, so we don't even get to see her there reacting. And then
when we finally do get the reveal, she's just like, "Oh, they told me. I'm so sorry. I was upset." And it's like that. But again, I don't know that we had had this kind of we're developing how to tell a story through film. And I don't think that they had found the more interesting ways to do that yet.
Real quick, do you see him get shot in the back in the film?
Yeah.
I may have watched a different cut than you guys did.
You straight up, he is, John Wayne has his back to him. The guy pulls his guns out, and then you see Zeke take the shot, and you see the guy fall.
That wasn't in the cut that I watched.
Oh,
Wow.
I went back, and I was like, what happened to, did they just say that Thorpe's gone? But, I mean, I guess it makes the film a little bit better to me. But
Watch the censored version.
Yeah.
I thought he just deserted them because he didn't want to deal with the heat, so he just left. That's just
Which seems like it would have been his vibe.
I was about to say, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, honestly, he had already tried to leave, so I kind of understand why you thought that without seeing. But did they not even mention?
Well,
no, he shot him in the back. He killed.
They addressed that he's been murdered, but I assume he just left and like someone tried to pin it on him, like frame him or something. I don't know.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
I didn't have the scene to work with, so I had to make my.
I will say her brother is like, yeah, I saw it. John Wayne shot him. I'm like,
I remember that part.
You didn't see shit.
Yeah. So good to know. I guess I'll need to like rewatch the film maybe at some point down the road.
All right. Anything else we want to mention about the big trail before we move on?
No, that's all I got for that one.
All right. Then let us move to our third film. The third film on the list is going to be as I said, now I can't remember her name.
Marlene Dietrich.
The Marlene Dietrich vehicle, Morocco. At infrequent intervals, a super picture is produced. One that sets a new standard by which other pictures will be judged. That takes its place with the mighty productions of all time. Such a picture is Morocco, the story of a fierce, tempestuous, all-consuming love, with Gary Cooper, Marlene Dietrich, Adolphe Menjou, and a cast of thousands. The screen finds its voice of love in Morocco, directed by Joseph von Sternberg.
Got them every day. We call them suicide passengers.
All right, that's enough of that one. All right. Do you guys enjoy my 1930s voiceover guy?
It was gorgeous.
Yeah, I mean, it's just text. It's no visuals or anything. But yes, so Morocco is a film, of course, pre-code film, directed by Joseph von Sternberg. It was music by Carl Yajos, although apparently he wasn't credited for the film. And it starred Gary Cooper, Marlene Dietrich, and Adolphe Menjou. And this is very much, like I said, a vehicle for Marlene Dietrich. I mean, Gary Cooper is there, but to me, this movie is Marlene Dietrich. Just to kind of give kind of a synopsis, basically, it takes place in Morocco, surprise, surprise, in the late 1920s. Gary Cooper is part of the French Foreign Legion, where Marlene Dietrich plays a nightclub singer, and they fall in love, and then there are dangers and shenanigans, and Marlene Dietrich is Marlene Dietrich, and there's love, I guess, and that's the movie. But I will say this: if you like this film at all, it 100% relies on how much you like Marlene Dietrich. Because I will say, like I said, Gary Cooper is very young in this movie, and he's still, hasn't,
Sweet boy, he does try.
Yeah, he still hasn't. I mean, he definitely has a voice. I don't know if it's the voice we associate with Gary Cooper yet. I mean, yeah, he's really just kind of, you know, the next in a string of love interests for Marlene Dietrich's character. I find her in this film extremely watchable and extremely compelling. I think that she has a very magnetic personality. I will say the majority of my notes on this film were about how awesome I thought Marlene Dietrich was, because she's very interesting to watch. And
She
what
really
I find,
carries it.
she really does. And what I
She earned the
find
part.
very interesting about this role is, if you explain to someone who Marlene Dietrich is, you feel like you're getting a lot of the same notes of her character in this film, because Marlene Dietrich was a person who was challenging gender norms at the time. She was, the studio would never admit it, but she was pretty outwardly bisexual, and, you know, very much was her own person in a time when that was not who women were supposed to be. And she has a very strong, very fierce personality, even towards the end when she is following Gary Cooper, you know, choosing to basically push everything, because at one point she basically agrees to marry Adolphe Monjou's character, who's like this rich guy who promises her all this stuff, but she's never in love with him. It doesn't really matter. But when she does make the choice to go with Gary Cooper, I feel like in other films that might feel like a betrayal, but the way that she does it, it still feels like a choice for her. It's still to me, the way that she plays it feels like something that she wants to do. It's something she's doing for her.
She goes after him, but he doesn't carry her off.
Exactly. Yes, it is still her choice. It is her making her own decisions, which I really admire and really enjoy about this film. Now, yes, is it the strongest film of this group? No. There's a lot of messiness. I know Hannah is not a big fan of Gary Cooper in this film. I didn't have as big of a problem with him, but to me, pales in comparison to Marlene Dietrich. I think she's everything in this film, and I think she's doing a great job.
Can you? I can't remember. Is Down the Road, is the Blue Angel one of our movies that we're watching at some point, or did that get taken out? Okay, good, because that's another Marlene.
Yes.
And so she had been doing stuff in Germany, including the Blue Angel,
Right.
and this was her big, definitely vehicle, but vehicle not in the sense of like that the American audiences were clamoring for her. This was like the introduction.
It was a way to show her off, though.
Yeah. It was like, this is our big star that we've got over there. Let's see if America will love her too. And it worked. And I absolutely agree that like the things I like about this movie are entirely her. I absolutely loathe the Gary Cooper character. I hate him so much. He's the worst human being. And
I mean, as a character, he's not great. Yeah, no.
And so I got very irritated watching her chase after him, because I was
what I found very interesting is that they keep trying to describe the two of them as the counterpoint for each other. Like, he's the male version of her and she's the female version of him. And I'm like, no, because he's not that interesting.
She doesn't make terrible decisions every time she comes into a crisis.
Yeah.
So that I found the scenes where she is doing her own thing are, I'm with you, absolutely compelling. She's the fact that she is very, very much, she absolutely conveys someone with complete agency. This is why she played so many femme fatales and evil women, because she was so compelling, but also so against the quiet and
she's not a damsel.
Yeah. And so she plays these characters really, really well, because she's so watchable and so like you are rooting for her even when she's being a villain, and she doesn't have to be a villain in this. She gets to be the hero.
I like
it works
that.
so well.
I mean, I'm sure that she's a great femme fatale, but I'm glad a movie like this exists where she
Mhm.
is the focus. She is the
Yeah,
protagonist.
I
Because
agree.
you do, like you said, you do want to root for her because
Exactly.
she's just so strong and so compelling. And so her choices are her own.
Yeah, she's someone who
Good or
I
bad,
really would
they're
be
hers.
I'm really intrigued what kinds of roles would have been for more modern movies would have spoken to her, like what kinds of things she would have landed in. Because I don't,
Yeah.
she absolutely did get pigeonholed as the femme fatale in that time because there were not that many openings for women who were that forceful.
Well, and they weren't
and
writing films for women
androgynous.
like her.
Yeah.
Right. They weren't writing films for women like her. And
Mhm.
now there are more. So
Yeah,
yeah,
and I
it
can
would have,
only imagine,
yeah.
like, how magnetic she would have been in a film that really was, like, letting her be all of that, and she was still able to do it, like, with the minimal pieces she got, like, she still absolutely makes it work. But yeah, the only thing I have to say about this movie is that Marlene Dietrich is great, and I'm very excited that we get to watch Blue Angel, because I really loved her in that as well. She's just really fantastic.
I'm trying to. I guess I can't post in the chat. If you want an idea, if you haven't seen this movie, look up the Criterion collection copy of Morocco and look at the cover. That tells you everything you basically need about the character, which is it's a fantastic poster. It just says pizzazz. I love it. I love it to death. Next time they have a flash sale, I plan to buy it because honestly, the film was a good watch. But anyway, great poster.
In the cigarette.
Which
Yeah.
poster?
Type in Criterion Morocco.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, you'll see it.
But you guys keep talking while I'm
Yeah. So yeah,
it's a good. So we'll narrate it like we narrate the
So Clay is
trailers.
searching. So yeah, no, I like this film. I don't think the plot is really anything too complex. I don't think the technicals are really anything all that impressive. I would be hard pressed. You cannot convince me that this film was not in some part some inspiration on the people who wrote Play It Again Sam, which turned into Casablanca.
I was going to say this is clearly Casablanca inspiration. Yeah.
It feels very prototypical to that.
Yeah.
I think the characters work in this film. I think my favorite part about them, obviously Dietrich is the standout, but I do like across the board that all of them have felt redeeming to me in a nice way. There wasn't like a true villain to me. Everyone has you understand, like the guy that she was going to marry, like it's not like the Duke from Moulin Rouge where they just turned into a cartoon character like at the end. It's like, okay, well, they at least give her the freedom to make her own decisions. It's not just like, you'll be mine, that kind of bullshit. Yeah. Same with the guy, the police inspector guy. I can't blank on his name. The guy who, what's his name? The Gary Cooper character thinks is going to basically get him when they're out, when they're out on patrol, and then no, he actually dies trying to save him. Like you get moments like that with like the characters all have their own redemption. I agree, Gary Cooper. With you, Hannah, I think if he was more wooden, Pauly Shore could voice him in a couple of years, which is fine. But Dietrich is obviously the standout. I think all in all, like I said, the characters keep the movie going for me. It wasn't my favorite. I think it's like right in the middle for me, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, it's right in the middle.
Sure.
It's fine. I would watch it again. I would like to maybe learn more about it. But as far as compelling storytelling, nah. As far as technically like pushing the boundaries as far as like how it's shot, how it's executed, meh.
It's
He's
all a
saying this was
spotlight.
not the picture against which all other pictures are now measured,
right?
As the trailer promised us.
Right.
I will say for reference, this is the shot we were talking about.
Yeah.
It's so good.
It really is.
Pizzazz.
Yeah.
And you get that feels just so. It just matches her character that we get in the film so well.
Yeah. No.
You know what I mean?
It's true.
It's not like a Netflix thing where it's just like, hey, we're just gonna take this random screenshot from a movie and make it our poster.
Yeah.
Like, why is Timothée Chalamet the cover of
Little
Lady Bird?
Women?
Little Women?
Or that too. I would say Lady Bird, but apparently he's on the cover of that one as well. So like, all right, cool. But anyway, I thought the film was fine. I liked it.
Yeah. All right. Yeah. And anything else that we want to say about this one? I mean, wasn't a whole lot to the plot, like I said. Once you finish talking about Marlene Dietrich, you're kind of done talking about this.
Best leading lady in the films we watched. I'll go ahead and take that call.
Yeah. No, she's definitely a front runner for best actress at this point, I would say. But let's go ahead now and let us talk about our fourth film. This is actually a film. Like I said, I always allow the host to choose one film to put onto the list, and this is my pick, and it is 1930s Ernst Lubitsch's Monte Carlo. And oh, that's right. I don't have a trailer for this one. I forgot because it's impossible to find. The only thing that there is there's a trailer for a Monte Carlo that came out in 2011 and apparently starred Selena Gomez. Not what we're talking about. But yeah, so no trailer for this film, but that's okay. I'll just talk about it. But yeah, so Monte Carlo, like I said, it was directed by Ernst Lubitsch, and it let's see, the music was by W. Frank Harling, and it starred Jack Buchanan, Jeanette MacDonald, and Claude Allister. And like I said, I got to choose this film, and just because we didn't get to do it before, I'm going to go ahead and show you guys the posters. This is the poster that I wish was the leading poster because it's more dynamic. This is the main poster I could find. I don't like that poster. It's dumb looking.
I would argue that the first poster at least conveys more dramatic feel to me, whereas this one it could be more of a comedic thing.
Yeah, and I mean, they're definitely.
In this one, she runs away to join the circus.
Yeah. I mean, that's what it looks like.
And somehow got jaundice along the way.
Yeah, but this is an early musical comedy. I mean, I would say musical romantic comedy. Because it very much is a rom-com, but like I said, I chose this film, and once again, I chose a film that I had not seen. I mean, I didn't really have a choice this time because I just really hadn't seen any films from 1930. So it came down to two films. It was either between the Hitchcock that came out this year, Murder, which I'd heard good things about, but I hadn't seen it. And then there was this one directed by Ernst Lubitsch, and I have never seen an Ernst Lubitsch film. And I will say this probably isn't the one that most people would start with. Most people would probably start with Shop Around the Corner, or one of his more
To Be or Not to Be, or
one of his more well-known films, but those didn't come out this year. The one that came out this year was Monte Carlo. And I will say, last time when I did Heavenly Creatures, I think we all liked that one pretty well for the most part. And I mean, I'm not speaking for you guys, but I think I made a pretty good choice again, because while it probably wouldn't have been most people's choice for the first Lubitsch to watch, I really enjoyed this one. Like I said, it is a musical rom-com, and it basically follows a woman, a countess, Helene Mara, played by Jeanette MacDonald, who basically is running away from her wedding from Duke Otto von Liebenheim, played by Claude Allister, for the third time. The third time she's running, and I'm just like, dude.
I think I played by him for the third time, and I was like, in what other things did he play the same character?
No. She's running away from him for the third. Yeah, sorry, I didn't. But yeah, she's running away from him for the third time. And she jumps on a train and basically just asks them where they're going. And after, actually, it's really the second choice they give her. She says, Monte Carlo, let's go to Monte Carlo. Monte Carlo, for anyone not familiar, is on the French Riviera, and it's also known to be a big gambling town. It's basically the equivalent of like an Atlantic City or I think honestly it's closer to Atlantic City than even Las Vegas. But I mean, some people might take offense to that. But yeah, so it's she goes there thinking that she's going to make a lot of money. She ends up actually losing money and falls in with another count, Count Rudolph Falieri, played by Jack Buchanan. And I don't know about you guys, but I saw Jack Buchanan. I was like, this guy was a silent film star because he just has the looks of a silent film star. Very, expressive face. You could see this man acting without speaking and understanding everything that he's doing. But basically, she doesn't want to have anything to do with him at first. So he finds a way to get an in and pretends to be a hairdresser that can't cut hair. But she begins to depend on him and starts using him for more and more things, to the point where we start to understand that they are in love with each other. She then has to reconcile, can she be in love with someone that she believes is a hairdresser? And hilarity ensues. But yeah, like I said, I really like this film. I had a lot of fun watching this, and a lot of I will say a lot of the films that we've been watching, I'm like, okay, yes, this definitely feels like a film from this time period. Like I said, I think I didn't mention it before, but like Big Trail would have big dialogue sequences, and then suddenly there'd be a title card, or things like that. The main thing in this film that reminded me, oh, this is, very close to post-silent era. There is, I think, number one, the opening scene of the film is practically a silent film scene. But also, you'll notice in a lot of the early sound films, they haven't quite learned, how to, they haven't quite started incorporating scores or anything yet. So there will be like dead silences while people aren't talking. And so there's you definitely feel the silences in a film from this time period. But other than that, this did not feel dated to me. This felt very, at the very least, like a musical that my mother would have shown me, and we watched a lot of musicals from like the 50s and 60s, so it feels kind of in tone with that. But yeah, I really enjoyed this film. What'd you guys think?
I am a huge musical fan. I don't like westerns or surreal, but I love my musicals.
Right.
And there are a handful of musicals that were around during this time. One of the things that really helps this, both this and our final movie, and there might be others that are like this, but one of the things that I find it looking back at these 1930 movies is that it's a rare gem to find something that's a decent digital transfer. And because a lot of them just like look real crappy and a lot of them are like, we're just, we're barely preserved. And, so now you have these crinkly viewings. And that makes the musicals less fun to watch because the sound is not as pleasant. And Monte Carlo is a really solid transfer, so it's actually enjoyable to listen to.
And especially for, number one, I had a hard time finding this film. You guys had to help me find it, but it's also not very well known. Like I said, there's no trailer for this. So the fact that the digital transfer is so good is kind of surprising.
Yeah. And for me, I think that's one of the things that makes it feel like a later film for me, is that just the fact that I had been so used to not really being able to see things very well, because a lot of these films are old and deteriorated. But this one was, for whatever reason, was one of the ones that got preserved. The other thing about musicals of this time is that we really are heavily into similar styles of musical of songs. And typically those are the ones that I don't find terribly compelling. They're usually just like random standards that are that are sung and don't connect to anything and aren't musically interesting really. And I enjoyed the music in this a lot more than I thought I was going to. That intro song from the other count that she runs away from was so much fun.
Yeah.
And
that character to me is so interesting.
Where I really wanted to love this, and the romance plot didn't really work for me at all. Like I was not at all sold on them. It wasn't as funny as I thought it was going to be. But I still really enjoyed I enjoyed the music so much, and the choice of songs and the way that the songs interplayed with the story really worked for me. And it was really nice because I hadn't found a lot of musicals that I'd really been enjoying, and this one was like my one musical from 1930 that I can really love the same way that I do all my others.
Something I found very interesting about the music in this is that, you know, a lot of times even in musicals there will be incidental music that doesn't have anything to do with the musical themes, whereas this one, even somebody whistling or like the clock tower they're all using refrains from the song.
It's all the same music all the way through.
I mean, honestly, I suppose on one hand you could think of that as lazy, but you could also see it as a fun, you know, way of connecting everything, you know. So I thought that was interesting.
So this is one that I was not as I had somebody tell me when I first started this project that she was like, I think this is going to be your number one of the whole year, and it's definitely not that. But it's definitely one that I could see myself rewatching. I could see these characters sort of growing on me in fondness, even if I am not immediately drawn to their story or their performances. But I like the music so much and had such a good time with that it's definitely the one that I'd like to go back. This was one of the few that I watched actually fairly recently, because I didn't watch this until you chose it. And so I didn't go back and re-see it because it hadn't been a year and a half. So I would like to someday go back and rewatch this one and see. I can see it being one that grows on me the more I watch it.
All right, Jack.
Oh, well, starting off, Clay, you were talking about the plot, and I'm going over this in my head while you're recounting it. Just, you know, a comedy about a woman who runs from her groom at the altar, escapes her homeland, cornered into captivity by way of debt, joins a perceived ruffian who turns out to be an upper class at the very end, and they get married. I'm thinking, oh my God, I'm watching Spaceballs. But no, I
mean, though this came first.
Yes,
that's inarguable.
I don't know. Was that also a long time ago, or am I thinking of the wrong franchise? But no, I'm going to play my hand a card with this one. I did not love this film. Again, I'm going to preface. I liked all of our films to different degrees across the board. This one I liked probably the least. I liked the standouts for me with this film were specific moments that stood out to me. I liked. I'm trying to think. Okay, so I liked moments of the acting, for example. Particularly her, the lead. Her breakdowns towards the end were actually seemed very sincere to me. I liked the levity that's pretty ever present throughout the course of the film. But you know, everyone, it's never too grim, it's never too dark. Everything, it's a vibe you associate with like a kind of classic older comedy like this. I like certain set pieces throughout the film, like the training corporations, the theater scene was obviously like fun. I was reminded of the Ember Island players from the last Airbender. With that particular stuff, just given the meta commentary it's providing. And like I said, some of the characters were fun to me. I liked the idea that they meet this guy who turns out to be a real hairdresser, and he just goes, "You're my best friend now," and they just start singing a song about it, and that's it. We move on. That's fun stuff to me. What holds me back from it a little bit, the music didn't really work for me. None of the songs I come to memory. I couldn't. I watched this film parts of it on a second viewing.
Yeah, I enjoyed the music, but I didn't find it phenomenal.
Yeah. I do agree with what one of you said in regards to this feeling like a very technically innovative film in regards to its style. I didn't know that this was directed by the same person who did To Be or Not to Be, which I totally see you vibing with that. The romance I felt was lacking for me. I didn't really buy into that. even looking at, I know I'm looking at this also through a modern lens, but the idea of that he's not held at all accountable by the fact that he's been lying to her this entire time felt kind of off to me. And again, it's not, I know we're looking at this, 90 years in the future, but I still feel like it was odd the film didn't really have any kind of drama with that going on, because it's all about her. Oh my God, I got mad at you, so I'm going to pine and beg for your forgiveness at this opera house. I'm like, what is this?
Yeah.
I also would have liked to see more from the would-be husband character, I guess, because his first song, it's very fun. I do agree that it kind of starts off like, I'm going to stand up for myself. I'm going to be mean, taking us back to the caveman days, and then he's just a simp for the rest of the film. It's like the two scenes.
Yeah, I think if this had been a little bit more of a three-hander, it would have been a little bit of a stronger film, because I find that character so entertaining, because he is, I mean, they straight up in this film call him a simp.
Yeah.
And I mean, did that have the same meaning at that time that it does now?
I do not know.
Because I mean, at first I thought that it was just incidental, but then the very next line they're jokingly calling him, an ass before, because they do that kind of playful play on words where they start the word and then they finish it with something else, but it's an actual word that they're calling him before. So yeah, I thought that was interesting, but yeah, he's just so, I mean, yeah, he does whatever. He's just such a pushover.
I do find the actor's performance entertaining. I wish that his return into the plot had more of a consequence, or at least some kind of impact, where it just seems like he comes back, they skip going to the table together to get around him, and then at the very end he's in her with the box with her, and then he dies in his seat, and then she leaves. So that's what threw me off a little bit about that one. But I like I said, I do like his take on the character. I just would have liked to have seen like a little bit more playing with that. The lead actor, I actually kind of didn't feel like a whole lot of gravitas from the leading guy for some reason or another. He is, I think it's more so his voice, because I think what you were saying, Clay, he has a very silent film type of voice where it doesn't seem like he's like this imposing count figure. He's like, I'm not going to do an impression, but
it's kind of a higher pitched. I mean, like I said, his presence was all in his face.
Yes.
His. I mean, I didn't think that his voice was bad. I looked at him and I thought, okay, this guy was definitely in silent films, because he just has a little look of a silent film actor. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, I found his performance charming and pleasant, but I wasn't blown away by it. I understand why you guys, didn't believe the love story. I really wasn't looking at it at that part. I was just enjoying both of their performances. But I mean, now that you mention it, Jack, you're right that they never take him to task for the fact that he's been lying to her the whole time, and the fact that he never really tried to confess to her when he had several opportunities.
And with I forgive you. Like,
yeah.
I got one more praise and I got one more pick. Then I'll shut up. Pick. Last thing is that the music in regards to again, this is 1930. I preface it with that. I couldn't understand a lot of what was being sung after going back a couple times. Specifically her. A lot of her singing, particularly the higher stuff,
very
sounded
operatic.
It sounded to me like audio-wise like Snow White singing into a well. You just can't really make out like a lot of what she's actually saying. So I had to go back and think, what is she singing right now?
Yeah.
Last praise though was probably my favorite scene in the entire film, was when they get back from their date, when they couldn't go to the tables, quote unquote, and she comes back in the room and she's horny as shit, and she like goes to the door and she locks it, and she's like, no, I got to put that key into another box. Oh God, what if I break there? And then she puts it into another box. I mean, the progression of that was really fun, and I think the way the actress performed that was really nice. And that's what I mean. I like the film for its specific moments, but as far as the interconnection, I felt like there could have been more.
Yeah, no, that's fair.
All right. So, is there anything else that we want to say about this film before we move on to our final film? No. All right. Well, then let us go ahead and go right into our final film for the evening. And it is the film that actually won Best Picture for, I believe, the 1929-1930 Oscars, and that is the anti-war epic All Quiet on the Western Front.
You fella, you know how much you're needed? Ah, I see you look at your leader. And I, too, look to you, Paul Baumer. I wonder what you're going to do.
I'll go.
I want to go.
Me too. I don't see that. The Kaiser's got everything he needs. Well, he never had a war before. Every full-grown emperor needs one war to make him famous. I'll tell you how it should all be done. Whenever there's a big war coming on, you should rope off a big field and sell tickets. Yeah. And on the big day, you should take all the kings and their cabinets and their generals, put them in the center dressed in their underpants, and let them fight it out with clubs. The best country wins.
All right. So that is, again, not much of a trailer, more just a collection of scenes. But, that is what we have for this film. So, Hannah, go ahead and take it away here.
Yeah, so All Quiet on the Western Front was based on the 1929 novel of the same name by a German novelist, Erich Maria Remarque. It was directed by Louis Milestone. It stars Lou Ayres, Louis Walheim, John Ray, Arnold Lucy, and Van Alexander. Music by David Brockman and cinematography by Arthur Edison. And it follows a group of young men, students at the beginning of the film, who join up to be soldiers for Germany in the First World War, and it follows them in battle, and then follows some of them, one in particular, as he comes home on leave and kind of sees how things are differently portrayed for him from on the battlefield versus what he was told they would be from the classroom where he first decided to enlist. So yeah, this is, do you want me, I guess I started talking. Do you want me to keep talking?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. It's like, I'll go for it. This is never. So this was like the second movie I watched for my 1930 list, because it was, the first one was just one that I happened to find, but then this one was the second one I watched, and it was, I think it's a remarkable movie. I think war movies can be a tough sell because, again, like Westerns, they tend to follow very similar storylines, and very similar ways of showing that either war is bad or war is good, depending on the angle you're going from. I really like that this one, I had read the book not too long before I watched the movie, and the book is also very striking. It was written by somebody who had, I don't remember if he was part of the war, but he talked to people who were, and like, this is all very much drawing from actual experiences of these young men who kind of were really inspired and motivated to go in for love of their country and for doing all that they could for it, and then finding that things were not what they were promised it would be, and that they were all kind of manipulated into going into fighting, and then were just sacrificed like it happens in war. I think this does a really great job of showing the build of this character, and it shows these moments where he joins with all his best buddies, and they're all in the same group, and they all go through it together, and then slowly, one by one, they lose limbs, and they are killed off, and they are sent home, and they and things start going wrong, and they it stops being a fun buddy heroic thing anymore. Yeah. The part that really sold me is the final 30 minutes where he is on leave. He gets to go home. He visits his family. He visits the teacher who inspired him to join up in the first place. And the teacher like expects him to give another motivational speech about like, oh, tell these kids that they need to go out. Yeah. But he's on the battlefront and seeing younger and younger students come out every day, being motivated to come out and join, and being like, they're just going to immediately be killed. Like, we're just sending kids out to die. There's not a purpose to this right now. And so I think it does really just such a remarkable job of showing this character starting off with all this youthful and enthusiastic and patriotic excitement to go out and do his best for his country with his friends and be one of the ones who step up and be called on, and then kind of losing that and not knowing what his place is anymore, not knowing what he needs to do. And I think it's very striking. And it does such a good job of kind of showing that transition and how that camaraderie that he has with his group is not enough to carry him through this. This is not enough to make it worth it in any way for him. So yeah, it's one that I think does a really, really great job with really connecting to those characters and showing their transition and their journey in a way that I did not expect to be as drawn in by this movie as I was. But I think it's really stellar.
Catch me up. Have you both seen the remake?
I have not seen the remake yet.
Not yet. Nope.
So I'll be careful with that, I guess, how I talk about this then. Something that okay, I'll go ahead and preface. I do like this film better than the remake. I know, based, but something that I really appreciate with this film as far as how it started out, and this is not at all related to the remake, but something I like about this film, how it started out, as far as how bold it was. What grabbed me from the very beginning was how it started off like it's like a prop. Why am I blanking on words today? A propaganda film.
Sure.
Because it starts off with this guy like giving this like very big and bold speech that you associate with like any kind of like mid-war type of thing coming out. To the point where I imagine if this film, I mean, there's no way this film would have come out in the 40s, 10 years later.
Mm-hmm.
But
no,
even in America, there's no way. But like even especially with that opening, there's no way that they would have had that as a juxtaposition with what was to follow. I think this film is a technical masterpiece for its time. Again, we talked about how impressive a lot of the practicals were and the set pieces were with a big trail, but holy hell, does this movie like knock it out of the park with not only like its explosives, its sets, the scale, how everything just feels like real in like this huge big world of war, so to speak.
Yeah.
I mean, some of these shots are just fantastic and honestly very much ahead of their time. There's that shot at some point in the first act where it's like it's shot through like this very wide window of like this town, and like you just see explosions going up and buildings crumbling through the window, and I'm like, whoever came up with that shot is just chef's kiss. It's fantastic. You don't see stuff like that in this time period. You associate that with stuff you would see now, and you get stuff like that still being done now. So again, like very impressive with stuff instances like that. I think the characters are great. I think the film does a great job of giving us a perspective character through Paul, but doing so in a way his pals, his buddies that go with him to war, it doesn't feel like it's full focus on Paul. They all feel like they have their own story, and like I feel like the only thing that really sets Paul apart from them is the fact that he survives. Because I think
it's not clear that he's the lead until we start seeing people get.
I was about to say I didn't feel like I didn't feel like he was the lead until about halfway through the film.
Well, because like even when they're going through like the different kids in the beginning, it cuts from like person to person. It doesn't have this.
He's just one of them.
Yeah, he's just one of them. And when you see these kids like through I call them children. They're going to war. These people, losing their minds or like having meltdowns or having to deal with their own turmoil. They all feel so different, but still connected to one another. There's some solidarity, but again, they all have their own struggles they're having to parse through, which again, it's so rich throughout the film that it's really dazzling to watch. And again, it's heartbreaking because there's not one character you don't feel for when they meet their untimely end in one way or another. Obviously, the last shot is very well regarded for a very obvious reason.
Yeah.
It's also one of those shots that really teeters, even by today's standards, teeters that fine line between being cheesy and being like impactful. And I think even if you made a shot for shot of that same shot in a film that came out today, it would still hit where it needed to.
Yeah.
I think as a bit of a criticism, I will say, I think the pacing overall is decent. I think the first stretch of film is very good. I think it does teeter a little bit after that. I think around after the either just before or around the time that Paul has the encounter of the guy who tries to save his life in the trench. I think maybe just after that, I feel like it kind of starts to really slow down, and I think the film is doing so in an effort to give us a bit of a breath because of all the drama that we've gotten. But I don't feel like it does it very rapidly picks itself back up from that till we get to the very final stretches of the film. Again, certain moments like when they're in the trenches and you hear the bombardments above them, and you see just dirt and grime and smoke coming through the doorway. It makes you feel so claustrophobic, and the way that it feels so viscerally, such visceral horror, is truly impressive for a film that came out 90 years ago. The fact that I felt as strongly as I did, not even trying to look at it through the 1930s lens. I'm watching this again now, not in prep for this podcast, but again in prep for the Oscars, just thinking, holy shit. This movie, I'm only watching mostly for the benefit of watching the remake.
The other
is
one,
really hitting it home with like moments of this, and I think, I mean, there's no question to me why this film won Best Picture because of at least I will say, of the films we watched today, this one I think checks off like the highest marks in all boxes that we put that. Acting wise is fantastic. I mean, character wise, again, certain character. Okay, again, we can talk about that in discussion. I don't want to eat up too much time. That's all I really have to say about that in the generals.
Yeah, I agree with both of you. I think that this film is phenomenal. I mean, it just, if you don't think that, I mean, whether or not you like the film, if you at least can't agree that it is phenomenal filmmaking or that it is making very good points about war, then you're not paying attention. It's really all I can say. I will say I do have an odd story with this because I've never seen this version, or I had never seen this version of the film before watching it for the podcast. But for some reason, when I was a kid, my mother tracked down the made-for-TV version from the 70s of this film, which apparently is hard to find.
Yeah.
But my mother found it because I guess she just assumed we'd connect more with that one than a movie from the 30s. I don't know. I do remember thinking that movie was very long. I mean, I watched it when I was like 11 or 12, but I remember it being very long. And I distinctly remember the scene, there's a lot of similar scenes, but the scene where he has sex with the French woman, and then the scene at the end, which is done differently than this one, but similar idea. But yeah, this film is clearly and inarguably an anti-war film. And it has been argued that it's hard to make an anti-war film because war is so cinematic. So no matter what you're saying, or no matter the points that you're making, or the dialogue of the characters, it's always, the battle is always going to look cool. I would say that the battle doesn't look cool in this. It looks miserable. It looks horrible. It looks torturous. And I mean, while I will say I had a hard time connecting to the characters at the beginning because this film, honestly, pretty much all of the films on this slate, I had a hard time always connecting names to faces. So, I didn't always know who we were talking about.
Just a group at the beginning anyway, yeah.
Right. Oh, exactly. But as we're seeing them go through certain things, I'm still connecting to them because of what they're going through and the way that the performance is being done. But I will say the two scenes that make this film for me. Number one is the scene, we saw a clip of it, where basically the soldiers are just talking about how stupid this war is. And that basically the whole reason for it is because one person in the government got offended by another person in a different government, and that's why they're all fighting. And I believe it's one of the characters, I can't remember if it's Kat or not. Kat, by the way, is one of my favorite characters in this whole movie. Played by Louis Wolheim, who actually died the year after this film came out. Yeah, unfortunately, but he's phenomenal in this film. But one of the characters makes the point. He's like, "Well, nobody offended me. Can I go home?"
Yeah. It's like, that seems reasonable.
Yeah. So I love how well they distill the ridiculousness of this and most wars.
Mhm.
But then the second scene is the scene that you were talking about, Hannah, where he confronts his teacher. I love that scene, especially because all he's doing is speaking truth. And the boys then start booing him.
Yeah.
And
social commentary.
yeah, it's just, it does not matter that they have been so indoctrinated. They are not willing to believe a person who was there, who
And
saw it.
the other scene right around that time that like really hits me is the one where he goes to visit the men in the pub
Men,
who
and
are
they're
all
like,
like
oh,
having
they
these
need
abstract
to
concepts
push
about,
to Paris. They need to,
this
and
is
they're
how
like,
we need to win the war.
we
And he's
can't
like,
eat.
and it becomes this like, it's absolutely, you know, we still get that where people have these big abstract discussions of like, what if we did this, and completely ignoring the input of the people who are
Well,
on the ground going through this
and-
right now. And
and
he's
they
just like, I can't do
straight
this.
up-
I'm out.
They straight up say, oh, but you can't see the big picture.
Mhm.
We can really see what's going on.
Yeah, and they're having this
Oh,
intellectual
okay.
debate, which is absolutely like he walks
Ridiculous.
out because he's like, this is like extremely insulting.
Yeah, no, it is. It's ridiculous.
There's a lot you can. I mean, even with like the Iraq War, like in hindsight for us, like imagine that like a film like this coming out or being remade in like the early 2000s, like that wouldn't have happened. The same message wouldn't have applied because like that just wasn't a thing. And to your point, Clay, I one of my favorite scenes is also the one where they're having the philosophical discussion, particularly while they all agree as far as the overall stance of like, you know, this isn't great and this is being fought by other people. They all have like their own philosophical takes on it, where it doesn't feel like it's an echo chamber. It feels like they're all having a general discussion. And I like
well,
it.
and there's still one of them is like, you know, he's like, but the Kaiser needs this, and you know, all, you know, they're still kind of, you know, supporting their government kind of thing.
Well, because they're there. They can't do that or they deserve.
You got to find ways to mentally justify what you're doing. Otherwise, you know, it gets real difficult.
And and obviously, Cat is the GOAT for me. He's like the polar opposite almost of like the teacher, because he's like honestly like he's like that base coworker. I'm gonna use the word base a lot. He's like that base coworker that you have, like the older guy, usually like who, you know, like you get in the office and you're like, oh, how's it going here? He's like, okay, well, this guy's an asshole. This manager you don't want to talk to. This guy you don't want to have to worry about. He's you know, he's very down to earth. He seems like he's the most jaded by war, but like he also seems like the most experienced, like the most down to earth about it. And you know, when you have
his final scene.
Oh yeah, it breaks your heart.
Yeah.
But yeah, when you have this like these kids, they're coming from this big speech from this classroom, and then they meet this guy eventually, where it's just like the exact opposite. It's like, okay, yeah, whatever, salute, whatever, I don't care. the new general staff or whatever he says about them, it's like it's a very interesting character, and one you honestly don't even see a whole lot in wars. You either see the turmoil type, you see the jaded type. Well, not jaded, but you know what I mean.
Right, well, and just to bring him up, we don't have to talk much about him, but the mailman, the guy who ends up being their drilling instructor, the kind of arc that happens with him is so good, so interesting to watch.
Yeah. One last gripe, I promise. Did the acting throw you guys off the first time you watched this?
The acting?
The accents.
Oh, the accents. Oh, because they're all American and they're German.
It's like they're German, and like you hear goes like, "Hey, yeah, let's go join the war. It's gonna be great. It's gonna be fun. Let's do this."
Yeah.
Shut up, you mook.
Hail the Kaiser. Yeah.
Come on, let's go fight for the Kaiser, you mook. I mean,
yeah. I mean, I will say again, I had seen the 72 version where they did the same thing. So, I mean,
wow.
I mean, well, they're still Americans playing Germans.
Sure.
Yeah, I will say they make a much less of a deal in this one than they do in that one. The progression of the helmets, because they start off with those helmets with those big spikes on them.
Yeah.
And then halfway through the movie, the spikes are gone because they drew too much attention to their soldiers. Yeah. Yeah.
But a fantastic film. Like I said,
Yeah. Agreed.
I could watch this movie on mute and I'd still have a great time. Like when you have like the panning shots of the tracking shots of the fences, the barbed wire, and like you see like a hand hanging from it. I'm just like, oh my god! Like you just don't see stuff like that, and you wouldn't associate images like that with a film that came out in 1930. It's amazing. The fact that the film got made is incredible. And,
Yeah. Agreed.
had a good time.
All right. Well, if there's nothing else that anybody wants to particularly say about this one, let us go ahead and I'm going to quickly reveal the consensus for this current crop of films.
Sorry, guys.
The consensus for our number one was All Quiet on the Western Front. Understandably, I mean, we all just spent quite a bit of time talking about how great it was, so that makes sense. Our consensus for number 4 was Monte Carlo. Number 3, The Big Trail. Number 2, Morocco, and number 4, we all came in with L'Age d'Or. I will say mine was pretty much on par with that, at least the top and the bottom. Hannah, I think you had the same top and bottom as well.
This is my exact order.
Right. Mine was just one
and
off.
Although I will point out,
Big
Monte
Trail
Carlo
flop.
and Big Trail actually had the exact same amount of points. We actually technically have a tie for that second place. Best.
True. And Jack, you're the only one that had a slight difference.
I'm the nonconformist piece of shit.
Yeah. You
It
did
keeps
choose
things interesting.
Yeah. We all three chose All Quiet for our number 1, but for your number 5, what did you choose, Jack?
For 5, I picked L'Age d'Or.
That is not what we saw on your thing.
I'm lying. No, I picked I picked Monte Carlo.
Yeah. Yeah.
I just wanted to fit in for a second.
I was like, then Hannah needs to change these numbers. But so that is the group for this one. I will say really quick, want to go ahead and let people know how they can get into contact with us. So you, of course, can contact me on Twitter and Instagram at The Flying Cow Pod. You can also email at theflyingcowpod@gmail.com. Remember to check out all of the various podcasts that we have available there. Also, don't forget to check out the YouTube channel for movie battles. Patreon.com/theflyingcow for our Patreon exclusives, including video versions of this podcast, as well as all of our other podcasts and our Patreon exclusive podcast Around the World, where myself and Lauren Collins talk all things Ernest P. Worrell. Quickly, let's see. Hannah, why don't you go ahead and tell people what you got going on?
You can find probably the most interesting way to find me is through my own podcast called Somebody Write This, where we take a randomly generated plot synopsis and then try to flesh it out into a plausible story. Always a lot of fun, always an adventure. We've got one coming up shortly that ended up being just a lot of poop jokes, so that'll be fun. So check it out, Somebody Write This, and you can find us on Twitter and Instagram at Write This Pod.
All right, Jack.
I have a podcast too. It's called It Came From the Bottom. We review movies from the bottom 100 of IMDb. We put out an episode or two every couple of years, and we just put one out earlier this month. So you can check that out now if you want. And if you want to check out season 2 of Loki. You'll spot me there, hopefully, if I make the cut. And otherwise, yeah.
All right. Well, yes, thank you guys for being with us. I will say join us next time where we will be reviewing the films Animal Crackers, Anna Christie, Earth, The Unholy Three, and The Divorcee. But until that time, move.
Mm.